Hello and welcome once again after a very long break to Living and Active. This is going to be a video on the Mottle's New Machine playlist, but it's not going to be like most of the other Mottle's New Machine content. And it's actually it's coming about because of the conversation that was started with another YouTuber on someone else's live stream. A question was asked and an answer was given, and I was actually hoping on fleshing out that conversation in my most recent live stream. That didn't have a chance to happen, so I'm going to address the issue here. I have previously in other videos, I think, explained the concept behind Mottle's New Machine, but let me go ahead and do it again so nobody has to dig for it. Mottle's New Machine, not Motels, is derived from the Taylor character of the musical Fiddler on the Roof. For those of you who do not know, Mottle the Tailor is a very uncertain sort of fellow. High anxiety, very nervous lad. And he had a problem. His problem was that he listened to everyone around him tell him that he wasn't yet a real person deserving of a real life, one that was fulfilling and full of moments of joy and the opportunity for growth as a person and as a member of his community. He thinks that none of that is going to happen until he can marry the woman of his dreams, and he thinks that that can't happen until he's worthy of asking the woman's father for her hand in marriage, and he thinks that that can't happen until he gets his hands on a sewing machine. With the sewing machine, so his plan goes, he will be able to grow his business, gain the respect of the community, and then build himself up over time as someone respectable enough to be worthy of the father's time when he finally gets around to going to him to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. The only problem with this plan is that while he's having this conversation with himself and with the daughter, the father is making arrangements for her to be betrothed to someone else. Obviously, this gets back around to our hero Mottle, and he panics, and he throws himself upon the mercy of the father, as she herself does, to not be forced into an arranged marriage and be made miserable all of her life. And so the father relents, right, and allows them to become married, but there's still this sense that Mottle has not achieved true personhood as of yet. In his mind, in the town's mind, and certainly in his mother-in-law's mind. Well, fast forward, and it's almost to the end of the movie before Mottle ever gets his machine. But in the meantime, he has gotten his bride. They've had their first child. He's grown in the eyes of the community to the point where when on the day he takes delivery of his new sewing machine, the entire village just about turns out to celebrate with him and to congratulate him. So he comes to find out that he didn't actually need the machine in the first place in order to be a real person, deserving of a fulfilling life, to be a real man, to be a good husband and a father. All of those things were dependent on something that had nothing to do something as simple as a sewing machine. The idea behind Malto's new machine is, as I had to do for myself, to figure out if maybe we're not waiting on the wrong thing to come into our sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, or joy in our lives. I thought for years, after I was in the wheelchair, that I had to wait for I had to wait for well, I did have to wait for the van because I couldn't go anywhere without it. But I thought that I had to wait for permission from my community to try to do things to help other people. I thought I had to wait for acknowledgement and respect from other members of the community in this town before I could be seen as someone that was genuinely worthy of consideration in any of the dealings around my community and the surrounding communities that I've tried to have. And like Montel, I discovered that I was waiting on the wrong things. So Montel's new machine, yes, it's about sewing machines. Yes, it's about the sewing. Yes, it's about the old world craftsmanship and the care of the old ways. But underneath all that, it's primarily about helping people to discover, as I did, whether or not they're waiting on the wrong things before they will allow themselves to believe that God has something far more precious in store and in mind for them than what they will be limited to if they keep staying stuck in, I can't act or do this or make this decision until XYZ happens. So that's the actual purpose of this thing called Montel's New Machine. It's a brand, sort of. It's not a company. It's not a business. But it's an idea. It's an idea, a banner that signifies a rallying point under which people can hopefully come into a realization that, you know, if they are waiting for the wrong thing, maybe they could be looking for the right thing, or maybe their fulfillment lies in a completely different direction altogether. So that's the backstory behind the name Montel's New Machine. Bringing this into answering the question that was brought up in the other channel's live stream. I don't remember the name of the live stream, so I'm not going to mention it. And because I am concerned with some things, I'm not going to link the live stream here. Just because of the tone that I like to keep on this channel, as this channel is mine to steward and to nurture and to protect as I see fit before the Lord. So while the conversation at the core of this video has its merit, then the actual environment in which the conversation took place might not be all that great for some people. So the question was asked, how can someone who is no longer able to work, i.e. me, and obviously this was a disability focused live stream, so this statement was true of many of the people who were participating in the stream and in the live chat. How can someone who is not able to work on someone else's payroll to be able to find fulfillment and a sense of purpose and place and identity in a reality in which they are of an age where they could be expected to have a full-time job and all these other things, but they've been removed from the physical capability of doing so. And that happens in any number of ways. So we'll leave our soapboxes stashed in the corners for the time being. So the answer I gave was very simple. Find ways of adding genuine benefit to the lives and the experiences of others outside of, like in ways that don't necessarily come back to you. And I wasn't able to expound on that point because the topic was very quickly changing and the conversation didn't come up again in the live stream, so here we are. But I had been hoping to have a conversation with Cordy Transforms. That's the person, the channel, whatever, that I was having this conversation with, and his channel link will be pinned in the comment below. But the idea I wanted to flesh out was, how do you actually, operating inside of an economic structure that is currency based and hyperinflated currency, almost to the point of hyperinflation, when the reality is that you are not able to compete inside of a currency based economy, especially if you're going to try to do things, active, productive things that bring genuine benefit to other people. So here's the Mottle's New Machine approach to answering that question. I'm not telling you that this is guaranteed to succeed if you try it. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. I'm just laying out what I've discovered as a way of operating that does all of the things without forcing me into competition in a game I can't win. So the basic point, the basic structure and framework of this entire theory of doing things, and I have to call it a theory because I'm the only one that does it, so I don't know if it works for everybody, is at some point, any economy, I don't care what the economic system is, any economy is basically grounded in production, distribution. Whether it's materials, whether it's information, whether it's goods, whether it's services, doesn't matter. It's production and distribution. Okay? This is where Victorian era and Edwardian era industry had things nailed. I mean, spot on. You can say all you want about, oh, the pollution of coal and all this other thing, but the Industrial Revolution happened because the means of production and the means of distribution were allowed to grow together, interdependently. As one flourished, so flourished the other one, and so both towers, shall we say, grew up big and strong and healthy, as did the products that were produced and introduced into the economy. In today's reality, we have moved away from a goods-based economy where the focus was on goods that help people lead productive lives and manage their lives by aiding in the work they had to do to sustain their lives. And now everything is about notional currency. The production is not an end, it's a means to achieving another level of acquiring currency. That's all it is. So how do we bring back a goods-based economy into something that's all ether and digitized nonsense? Well, I think I've stumbled upon at least some form of an answer. The answer is not to play the big game of the overall economy. The answer is to create an opportunity for a sub-economy, something that supports the possibility, the opportunity of others to rejoin a goods-based economic system, at least partially. Obviously, one of the keys to doing this is by going to means of production and distribution that are not dependent on the current infrastructure. Analog. It is now 9:30, or whatever you want to call it. Now, there are things in place inside this current economy that are meant to keep people from doing this. If you go through any of the usual channels to get your hands on anything, I don't care if it's tools or equipment, old machines, even the information you need to learn these things, it can be, if you do it haphazardly, prohibitively expensive just to do that. And then what happens is that you spend all of your time and energy and resources on trying to equip yourself, and you don't give yourself room to actually do anything with the stuff that you've gathered. So there's a balanced approach initially in building up knowledge, skill, learning what you can and can't do, learning what is necessary, what is not necessary, what is possible, what is not possible, and allow what presents itself to stay as it is. What do I mean? With the sewing machines, it started out before the sewing machines even. I started off not in sewing machines, but in yarn. I had at one point wanted to be a missionary to Ukraine. Part of the mission work I wanted to do was to teach the orphans and whoever else that was over there practical skills that they would be able to use to make things to help sustain themselves in a constantly fracturing economy on the edge of what at that point was not yet an active war zone, even though it kind of was. I'm talking eastern Ukraine here for those of you who don't know. I came to this town with that goal in mind. I wasn't in the wheelchair yet. Then suddenly I got to this town, and then Russia invaded, and then I ended up in a wheelchair. So obviously I wasn't going to Ukraine, but I had already started the process of learning different skills and trades and whatever else, and now I had the additional reason of learning these things because I had suddenly, not unexpectedly, but I had rapidly declined in my mobility way faster than I thought I would, and I had lost what remained of my ability to work in the things I thought I was going to be able to do at least part-time very quickly. So I took the learning of the skills that I had been intended to teach to orphans on the other side of the world, and I applied that to myself. What can I learn just to find something that I can still do? That, of course, necessitated getting my hands on things like crochet hooks, knitting needles, yarn, books to teach me how to do things, whatever else. But I did it. I did it slowly. I started with things I could find at the thrift store and everything else. And as I was going through that process, I started paying attention to what other people were saying about the things they wanted to do that they didn't think they could still do, and how hard it was for them to find resources. And so the thought occurred to me, well, if the means of production, the materials that are needed to be put into the skilled hands of those who already have the knowledge is just being hindered by the cost of those materials and their dwindling availability, then injecting growth into this local economy could be as simple as bringing materials to a thrift store and donating them for others to be able to pay a lower price, be able to afford the thing they love to do, and be able to do it again. And these people I saw, as they came into more yarn that they could use, were crocheting things that they would immediately turn around, like blankets, clothing, whatever, or knitting things that they would immediately turn around and donate back to the thrift store. Then I started paying attention, like really close attention, to how this sub-economy worked. The crafty person got the materials at a reduced price that they could afford. They bought it. They immediately turned around and they donated it back to the thrift store, who turned around and sold it, not for as much as they could have charged for it, but for a price that was, again, affordable to whoever needed the clothing or the blanket or whatever. And then that money was in turn, at least in part, put into the food pantry that's run by the thrift store. People come to the food pantry, they pick up what they need, their household budgets have a little bit of the strain reduced, and so they have more income to be able to put towards means of production that they wouldn't ordinarily have had. The first sewing machine that was ever part of any kind of sewing machine project, under the name Montel's New Machine, was a 1956, I believe, Singer 301A. It was in a box. It was a jumbled up mess of nothing, and it hadn't been looked at, hadn't been checked over, nothing. I picked it up at that thrift store for $3. That is not the worth of the machine, by the way. That's just what I paid for it. I hesitate to throw that number out there because people will be like, well, you got one for $3, so I should get any machine that I look at for... No. It was a definite moment of grace from the hands of the Father to start me on this path that would become Montel's New Machine. But that first machine was $3. Okay? I bought it. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't know anything about sewing, really. I'd had a couple modern machines. I'd made some little stuff here and there or whatever, but I wasn't serious about really any of it. And then right about that time is when the not going to Ukraine thing happened, when the wheelchair thing happened, is when the I need to learn a marketable skill very quickly that I can actually do from a wheelchair. Sewing turned into the thing. So of course I did what everybody else does. I went to the tubes of view and I started doing all of the research, video watching, and I learned as much as I could about that particular machine. And so I got it up and running and I started using it. I was happy and all of these other things. And then I started seeing content made by YouTube channels or people that have YouTube channels dealing specifically with vintage and antique technology, specifically focused on things that make other things. And I started listening to what people were intending behind the work they put into bringing back, preserving this old technology. And if you listen to the subtext of what they're saying, every single one of them was saying the same thing. And they were doing the things they were doing for the same reason. They had different approaches. But it's all about re-injecting genuine value and worth into the individual microeconomies of people, of households, of families through generations. And so I took that first machine and I used it and I did some stuff with it, whatever. And then I said, okay, I've got this machine now. I've fixed it up. I've learned how to fix it up a little bit. I've got it maintained. I've got it nice, in good condition, a lot better condition than it was when I bought it. So, because someone else, because I learned the actual value of that machine, someone else who already knows what this machine is, what it can do, might have some fond memory of their mother or grandmother or somebody using something like this, might have an appreciation for this machine as I do, and so I'm going to redonate it back to the thrift store. Now the machine's in better condition. It can be and was sold for a larger number that was still sound. So the same machine was part of 2 transactions at the point of sale, increasing in value, 2 transactions that funneled increasing numbers or funds to the food pantry, and now, due to the second sale, is in the hands of someone who is most likely making things that are being used to benefit other people. I didn't put much time or money into that first machine because I didn't know what I was doing. And I think, in fact, the initial maintenance thing I did was take it to somebody locally and have them look at it just in case I messed anything up or whatever. They gave me a few pointers and talked about it, whatever else. And so that started the learning thing. But the point of this whole video is, I know it's already almost half an hour long, but the point of this whole video is, if you genuinely want to figure out how with your life, your reduced, diminished, whatever word that people try to throw at you, if you genuinely want to figure out how to get out of the dumps, how to not get stuck waiting for the wrong thing in order to feel like a real person, deserving of fulfillment and joy and a sense of place in your own life, then I invite you to consider the following. Play a part in planting and nurturing sub-economies, as I've just described, that are based in goods, actual goods, tangible goods. Okay? The best way to do this, as I've discovered as the sewing machine project has grown and matured, the best way to maximize the good inside of a local community's economy is to be the same point that is able to, one, drop the price point to zero or as close to it as absolutely possible, while simultaneously increasing the actual value and worth of the good in question. Okay, we're talking about tangible goods here. Okay, so for instance, I find a fairly decent antique or vintage sewing machine. It's in rough shape. No collector's gonna buy it because it's a lot of work. And they prefer the nice, pretty things. Nobody that has the money to do the role play of someone who is getting back into old technology or whatever. Sort of the costume actors of the goods-based economic movement. Those types of people go on Etsy, they go on all of these other places where the machines are almost pristine, and and they're paying, as these machines are actually worth hundreds of dollars. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like these machines aren't worth that amount. They truly are. But if you're going to be on the helping side of the equation, find the machines that no one knows what to do with. They don't know what they're worth or whatever, and you're not taking advantage of anything, because most people who are trying to get rid of a piece of old equipment or machinery, they don't know or care what its value is. They just want it out of their way. So anything they get for it, and they will tell you this, is a bonus. We're not dealing with worth at the beginning parts of this, because you need to be able, if you're going to do this, you need to be able to afford to do this consistently, to be the point at which the price point drops to or near zero, but the value is increased. So you need to save your budget that would ordinarily go into be buying the thing, and put as much of that towards improving, preserving, restoring the thing as you possibly can. Cause the greatest increase in worth and value at your point in the economy, and then when you pass it on, like the system I described with the thrift store, pass it on at as low of a cost or investment to that initial next link as is utterly possible, and then you guarantee that every single chain after that, no matter which direction, can only see an increase in value. Okay, so the person, I get a machine, I put a little bit of time and money, quite a bit of time and money into it, whatever. I make the decision to drop the price point. I make the decision to release it back out into the wild, move it along the economic chain through a venue that isn't going to have to lose a whole bunch of money to get this resource from me. They don't have to lose any money to get this resource from me. And then they turn around and then they can actually move it to the next link in the economic chain for 100% profit. Okay? Now, the important part of increasing the value and the worth of this thing before or as I drop the price point to zero is if I funnel forward a piece of garbage that doesn't have any kind of increase in actual worth or value, or sustained merit as a means of production, I'm not doing anybody any genuine favors. Increase the value of the thing. Make it actually worth something while you're making it easy to get. Then the next person, the person that buys it from the thrift store, hands over the money. That transaction is complete. Money from the transaction goes back to the food pantry, and the higher price, within reason, that is able to be paid for that thing because it has more value means more money going back to the families, to their food, to help their food budgets, to reduce the strain on their households, to alleviate some of the stress, and maybe take away some of the things that are distracting them from doing other productive things. Going in the other direction from the point of sale, now the people, whoever bought the machine, has acquired a fundamental piece of the means of production in a goods-based economy. And truly, it doesn't matter if they turn around and sell that machine for hundreds of dollars on Etsy, as they would be able to do, because the intent is still met. I wouldn't accuse anybody who did such a thing of gaming the system, because because the system is not gameable. The objective of the system is increasing impact and worth at every continuing point down the chain. So if someone buys a machine for what could turn into pennies on the dollar, still enough to do good to the people depending on it to fund the food bank, and then they turn around and they sell it for much more money, they are still doing the same thing, because they are taking that increase from what they sold the machine for, and they're applying it to their own individual or household budgets, which is doing the same thing on a larger scale as what's being done for the people who come to the food pantry. Now that machine has increased in value again, so if it's bought by a collector, who will once again increase the value by the work they do to it, and they have prestige or whatever, and they bring the value way up, then someone who can afford to do such things can look for it, and they can add it to their costume retrofit, whatever goods economy role play that they're going to do, and it is still met that same purpose. Now let's back up a little bit to the initial point of sale at the thrift store. If the customer buys the machine at the asked for price, and they take it home and they don't sell it, but instead they use it to make things to donate to other people who need them but can't necessarily afford them, that is continuing the increase in value, in real value, and now also in goods in the local economy, meeting needs that now people don't have to worry about figuring into their budget, so that they in turn can continue to progress with whatever they need to do to get through their days. Again, freeing people from unnecessary expenses that would do nothing other than drain what's available to them. Someone who takes the machine, buys the machine, and recognizes it for what it is, for their own use, is also more likely to pass on the skills that are bound up inside using the machine, sewing, whatever, to other people, to make them a little bit more self-reliant. to liberate others from, just a little bit even, from the currency-based entanglement of the current economy. At no point in any direction does this way of doing things ever get to the point of becoming inversely beneficial to anyone until you get up to like the collector status, and they don't care. They're rich enough to be collectors of the fine and fancy or whatever. I have a collection of these machines. I am not the hoity-toity type of collector, however. Anyway, but there's got to be a point. Someone has to be willing to be the point at which the price point drops as low as utterly possible. The value is increased as much as possible. And then the very next step in the chain has to be the distribution. You have the means of production, now you have the means of distribution. A place like a thrift store, a consignment shop, or whatever, that's able to move those elements at a price that is affordable to the general population who are similarly minded in order to have the maximum amount of benefit. So if you're stuck in this thinking that since you don't have a job, you're not on someone's payroll, your value, your potential place inside your community is forfeit, I hope, if you still think that way, you go back, rewatch this video, and learn something new. Because as Malta learned, he was waiting on the wrong thing. And it wasn't until he started looking in the right direction that he found not only his worth, but worth in all of the other things he didn't even realize he was building all along. So, let that be an encouragement. I'm going to mention the person this is actually for in the title and in the pinned comment. Remember Hebrews 11:6. Without faith it is impossible to please God, because those who come to God must believe that He is. He is a rewarder of those who seek Him. So as you seek fulfillment, be seeking it in ways that are pleasing to Him, by benefiting others, being a vehicle of mercy as much as possible. And until next time, if there is a next time, and there might not be, God be with you.